backyard, the teenager glued to a game console, the college student who dropped by during holidays. But that day was different. I heard the garage door creak open behind me. I thought it was Denise, maybe coming by to borrow some tools she'd forget to return. Instead, Even stepped inside, gently closing the door behind him. He gave a soft smile, the kind that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Aunt Mara, you got a minute?" His voice had a seriousness to it that made me pause. I brushed the dust from my hands onto my jeans and motioned him over. He walked in slowly, looking around as though the tools and boxes were suddenly unfamiliar territory. He sat on the edge of an old wooden stool, elbows on his knees, fingers laced together. "You okay?" I asked, keeping my tone light, though a small knot tightened in my stomach. I've raised 2 kids of my own. I know the signs of a heavy heart. He took a long breath before answering. I didn't know who else to talk to. That sentence alone pulled me fully into the moment. The garage suddenly felt quieter, like the entire space leaned in to listen. "Well, you're here," I said gently, "and I'm not going anywhere." He nodded but kept staring at the concrete floor. For a moment, I wondered if something terrible had happened, trouble at school or with a friend, or maybe he was worried about Denise. But then he lifted his head, and what I saw in his eyes wasn't fear. It was something softer, heavier, like an emotion he had carried for far too long. "I've been feeling lost," he said finally. "Like I'm supposed to know what I'm doing with my life by now, but I don't. And everyone keeps telling me I'll figure it out, but no one really listens when I say I'm scared. Except, well, you always seem to understand things." That surprised me more than anything. Me? Understand? I've spent half my life pretending to have the answers, even on days when I barely kept my own doubts from spilling over. But hearing him say that, hearing that he saw something steady in me, made my chest warm with a strange mix of pride and guilt. How many times had I brushed him off with a quick, "Oh, you'll be fine," without realizing he needed more? I shifted my chair closer. "Even, everyone feels lost in their 20s. I wish someone had told me that back then." "But you always know what to say," he added, eyes meeting mine finally. "I feel like I can talk to you about things I can't even tell Mom." I didn't interrupt. I just let him speak. He told me about his classes, how he chose a major because it sounded practical, not because it meant anything to him. He talked about feeling out of place among friends who seemed so confident about their futures. And then he admitted something that struck me deeper than I expected. "I feel like I'm disappointing everyone," he whispered. There it was. Truth he had carried like a hidden weight. I reached over and rested my hand lightly on his arm. A simple gesture, comforting, grounded. "You're not disappointing anyone," I said softly. "Least of all me. You're figuring things out. And that takes time. More time than people admit." He let out a breath, shoulders relaxing like someone finally allowed to rest. In that moment, sitting in a dusty garage surrounded by old memories, I realized something important too, that sometimes the people we think of as children are quietly becoming adults with their own storms inside them. And sometimes all they need is someone willing to sit with them in the middle of the mess, without judgment, without rushing them toward an answer. The sun dipped lower, casting long golden shapes across the concrete floor. Neither of us spoke for a while. We didn't need to. I didn't know it then, but what Evan confessed next, the deeper truth he wasn't ready to voice just yet, would change the way I saw not only him, but myself, and the role I still had to play in someone else's life. The next day I kept thinking about Evan long after he'd left. Even while I made dinner, folded laundry, and went through the little routines that stitch a day together, the memory of his troubled expression kept resurfacing. I've always had a soft spot for him, maybe because he reminded me a little of myself at that age, quietly thoughtful, a bit unsure, always trying to appear stronger than he felt. But something about yesterday stayed with me more strongly than I expected. I woke early the following morning, long before the sun had fully risen. The house was quiet, that kind of gentle quiet that feels like a held breath. A thin line of light crept through the blinds in my kitchen, touching the edge of the table where Avon had once sat as a child drawing pictures of robots and dogs with crayons. I made myself a cup of coffee and stood there for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the faraway sound of someone starting a car down the street. Something told me I hadn't heard the real reason he came to see me. By noon, I was in the backyard, sweeping the patio. The warm breeze carried the scent of early autumn, dry leaves, a hint of distant wood smoke, and the cool earthiness of the trees that bordered my property. I wasn't expecting company, so when I heard footsteps behind me, I turned slowly, half expecting to see a neighbor. It was Avon. He stood there with his hands tucked into the pockets of his jacket, his expression calmer than the day before, but still carrying that quiet heaviness in his eyes. I couldn't help but smile, though I kept my tone casual. "Back so soon?" I said, leaning the broom against the wall. He shrugged. "I hope it's okay. I wasn't sure if you were busy." "You can always stop by. You know that." He nodded, then looked past me toward the old wooden bench under the maple tree. "Can we sit for a bit?" We walked to the bench, and when we sat down, the wood creaked softly under our weight. The maple leaves above us rustled like they were whispering secrets between themselves. I waited for him to speak first. Something in his posture told me he had rehearsed this conversation more than once. "Aunt Mara," he said slowly, "yesterday, I didn't tell you everything." I kept my breathing steady, listening, not pushing. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees again, just like he had in the garage. "I didn't come just because I'm unsure about school or the future. That's part of it, but there's something else." His voice wavered just enough for me to notice. I shifted slightly, turning my body toward him, so he knew he had my full attention. "You don't have to rush," I said gently. "Take your time." He gave a small, grateful nod. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The breeze lowered, settling into a soft, comfortable stillness around us. A bird hopped across the yard, occasionally glancing our way as though curious about the heavy air between us. Finally, he exhaled and spoke again. "I've been carrying this feeling," he said, choosing his words carefully. "A feeling that something in my life isn't matching who I am. A feeling I've been too afraid to admit because I didn't want to worry my mom or make anyone think something was wrong with me." My chest tightened, the way it does when you sense someone is on the edge of saying something deeply important. He ran a hand through his hair, frustration and relief battling in his expression. "I don't really know how to explain it. It's not about school. It's not about friends. It's more like I'm trying so hard to be the person I think everyone wants me to be, and I'm exhausted. I don't even know if I like the version of myself I pretend to be." His voice wasn't dramatic or loud. It carried more truth than intensity, more vulnerability than fear. I felt my heart pull toward him with a tenderness I hadn't expected. I placed my hand on the bench between us, not touching him directly, but close enough for him to know I was steady and present. "It's okay to feel that way," I said softly. "Many people go through something similar, though most never say it out loud. It's brave, Evan. Really brave." He swallowed hard, and for the first time since he arrived, he met my eyes fully. I didn't know who else I could talk to about it. "And I'm honored you came to me," I answered. "You're not alone in this. Whatever you're discovering about yourself, whatever you're sorting through, it's yours to explore at your own pace." The tension in his shoulders eased just a bit, though his expression remained thoughtful. "I'm not sure where to start," he admitted quietly. "You've already started," I told him, "by speaking it out loud." He let that sink in. The breeze picked up again, swirling a few fallen leaves at our feet. We sat there in silence, but it wasn't a heavy silence, It was the kind that wraps around two people who are learning how to communicate in a deeper, more honest way. After a moment, he said, "I feel like you understand me better than most people." I felt something warm settle inside me. Not a romantic feeling, nothing inappropriate, just a deep human connection, the kind of bond that forms when someone trusts you with the fragile parts of their heart. "I understand what it feels like to question who you are," I told him truthfully. "And I understand how hard it is to say those things out loud. You're not strange. You're not lost in a way that can't be found. You're growing." He smiled softly, like he wasn't sure if he deserved to smile, but was grateful for the permission. The sun filtered through the maple leaves, casting a soft, shifting pattern of gold across his face. For a moment, I saw not the boy who used to run around with scraped knees, but the young man he was becoming, thoughtful, open, searching. "I think there's more I want to tell you," he said, voice quiet but steady. "But I'm not sure if today is the day." "That's all right," I said, "when you're ready." And at that moment, I knew his story, whatever shape it took, wasn't just about fear or doubt. It was about transformation. And somehow, in ways I didn't yet understand, I was meant to be part of it. For the next few days, I found myself thinking about Evan's words more often than usual. They would surface in the middle of everyday tasks, while rinsing dishes, unlocking my car, or folding the laundry, little echoes of that uncertainty he carried. His honesty had touched something deep in me, perhaps because it reminded me of my own hidden uncertainties over the years. We all carry quiet questions. We just rarely say them aloud. It was early evening when my phone buzzed. I'd been sitting on the couch, a soft blanket draped over my legs, the TV humming in the background. When I saw Evan's name flash across the screen, a calm sense of inevitability washed over me. I answered on the second ring. "Aunt Mara?" His voice was soft, almost cautious. "I'm here," I said. "Everything all right?" "Could I come over? I think I'm ready to talk a little more." I didn't need time to consider. "Of course. I'll be in the kitchen." When he arrived, the sun had dipped low, leaving behind a quiet blue glow that softened everything it touched. He stepped inside, closing the door behind him gently, as though trying not to disturb the house. He wasn't tense, but he wasn't relaxed either. It was the look of someone preparing to cross a bridge they'd avoided for too long. "Do you want tea?" I offered. He nodded. I brewed 2 cups, 1 chamomile, 1 peppermint, and let him choose. He took the chamomile, sitting across from me at the small round table that had seen years of family dinners, arguments, laughter, and now this quiet moment of truth. For a while, we simply sat, letting the warmth of the tea settle between us. Finally, he spoke. "I've been thinking about what I said the other day," he began, "about not feeling like myself." "I'm glad you've been thinking," I replied softly. "That's where clarity begins." He swallowed, eyes drifting toward the window where the first stars were beginning to appear. "There's something I've always struggled with, something I never told Mom, and I was afraid to tell you too." I folded my hands on the table, giving him space. "I'm listening." He took a breath, long and steady. "All my life, people told me who I was supposed to be. What kind of man? What kind of student? What kind of future I needed to have. And I tried, really tried, to fit all that, but none of it ever felt natural." He hesitated before continuing. "And lately, I've realized it's not just about school or expectations. It's about how I see myself. Or how I don't." My heart softened, a deep, familiar tenderness rising within me. These were the kinds of truths people often carried alone for years, sometimes decades. I leaned in just a little, not crowding him, but making sure he felt grounded. "You don't need to have all the answers right now," I said. "You're discovering who you are. That's not a failure. That's growth. He blinked hard, as though fighting back a feeling he didn't want spilling over. I was scared you'd judge me, or think I was being dramatic. I'd never judge you, I said firmly. You're opening up about something important. That's not drama. That's courage. He let out a breath that seemed to take half his tension with it. When I was little, he said, you were the one person who never pressured me. You let me be quiet when I wanted to be quiet. You let me talk when I needed to talk. You always treated me like my thoughts mattered, even when I was a kid. And when I started feeling confused about myself, you were the person I kept thinking about telling. Something in my chest tightened, not with discomfort, but with a gentle ache of responsibility. I hadn't realized how deeply he saw me. I gave him a small smile. I didn't know that. He nodded. It's true. You've always made me feel understood. For a moment, neither of us spoke. The clock on the wall ticked quietly, almost too loudly in the otherwise still kitchen. Finally, he said, there's one more thing I want to tell you. Something I've never said out loud. I waited, steady and calm. I don't think I've ever really allowed myself to dream about the life I want, he said. I've only been trying to live the life other people imagined for me. And the more I realize that, the more I feel like I'm standing on the edge of something new. And I don't know if I'm ready. The vulnerability in his words struck me deeply. Not because it was dramatic, but because it was real, the kind of truth that sits quietly in the human heart for years before being spoken. I reached out and gently rested my hand near his, not touching, just offering quiet support. Even, I said softly, you don't have to be ready today. You don't have to know everything. What matters is that you're beginning to ask the right questions. And I'll be here, however you need me, as you figure it out. He looked up, and for the first time that evening, he smiled with a clarity that reached his eyes. Thank you, he whispered. I don't think I could do this alone. You won't have to. The moment felt like a turning point, not dramatic, not loud, but steady and significant, like the slow shift of a tide before anyone notices the water has risen. Outside, the night settled fully over the yard, wrapping the house in a quiet calm. Inside, I could sense that Even was finally beginning to trust himself enough to keep exploring the truth he buried for so long. And though I didn't yet know what he would say next, I could feel that the most important part of his confession was still ahead. For several minutes after Even finished speaking, we simply sat there in the soft glow of the kitchen lights, the quiet of the house settling around us like a warm blanket. I could sense he was still gathering the courage to say the last part of what he had come to share. His tea had grown cold, untouched since the first sip, his hands wrapped around the cup as if the simple act of holding it grounded him. You said there was something more. I reminded him gently, not pushing, just opening the door. He nodded slowly. Yeah, there is. Outside, the wind brushed against the windows just softly enough to make its presence known. It reminded me of nights when my own children were young, confessing things they had held inside far too long. There's always that delicate pause, that fragile breath before someone reveals the truth they've been carrying like a hidden stone in their pocket. Even finally set the cup down and folded his hands in front of him. I've been struggling with who I'm supposed to be, he said. But it's more than that. I'd also been struggling with how to say what I want my life to look like. In my heart, I've always felt different from the picture people expected of me. He paused, choosing his next words with care. I'm not trying to rebel or cause trouble. I just want a life where I feel like myself. A life where I'm allowed to be thoughtful, quiet, creative. Where I'm not judged for taking my time. I don't want to chase things that don't feel true to me. I don't want to pretend to be someone I'm not just to fit a mold. His voice softened. And I guess I came to you because you're the one person I've always trusted to see me without expecting me to act a certain way. Those words struck something deep inside me. Not pain, not discomfort, but a profound recognition. When you reach your 50s, you start to understand how many people drift through life without ever feeling truly seen. The fact that he found that in me felt like an honor I didn't take lightly. I leaned back in my chair, letting his confession settle. "You're not wrong for wanting those things," I said quietly. "In fact, you're ahead of most people your age. Many don't realize what they want until much later. Some never do." He looked up, hope flickering in his expression. "When I was younger," I continued, "I tried so hard to meet everyone else's expectations. I wanted to be the perfect mother, the perfect sister, the perfect employee. But somewhere along the way, I realized I had forgotten who I was.